The Circuit and the Spark, The Making of Edison. Chapter 1, The Canal Boy, 1847 to 1854. The winter of 1847 in Milan, Ohio, was a biting, bitter thing. The town sat perched on the edge of the Huron River, a bustling port where the canal boats jostled for space, carrying the grain of the Midwest out to the Great Lakes. It was a place of commerce, noise, and movement, a fitting birthplace for a storm. On February 11th, inside a modest red brick house, Nancy Edison gave birth to her seventh child. She named him Thomas Alva. To the family, he was simply Ul. He was a sickly infant, his head surprisingly large, his brow furrowed as if he were already trying to solve a puzzle he couldn't quite articulate. Samuel, his father, a shingle maker and a man of restless energy who had fled a rebellion in Canada, looked at the boy with a mixture of pride and worry. The doctor had warned them that the boy might have brain fever, a diagnosis that in those days was as terrifying as it was vague. But Ul did not die. He grew into a solemn, watchful child. Milan was his first laboratory. He did not play like other children, he observed. He watched the canal boats negotiate the locks, he watched the blacksmith hammer glowing iron, he watched the geese in the town square. One afternoon, at age 4, Ul went missing. The family searched the house, the yard, and the terrifyingly close canal banks. As later, his father found him in a neighbor's barn. Ul was sitting perfectly still in a pile of straw, atop a clutch of goose eggs. "What in God's name are you doing, Ul?" Samuel demanded, relief making his voice sharp. "The goose does it," the boy replied, his eyes wide and serious. "I want to see if I can make them hatch." He had sat there for hours, patiently waiting for his own body heat to spark life. The eggs, of course, were crushed and ruined. But the instinct was there, and the refusal to accept that nature's magic was exclusive to nature. If a goose could do it, why couldn't he? When the railroad bypassed Milan, the economy collapsed, and the Edisons moved to Port Huron, Michigan. It was here that Ul's formal education began, and abruptly ended. His teacher, the Reverend Engel, found the boy's constant questions and wandering attention infuriating. He called Ul adult. Nancy Edison, a former teacher herself, was furious. She pulled Ul out of school the next day. "My son is not adult," she told him, gripping his shoulders. "You have a different way of learning, Ul. We will learn here. Together." And so, the world became his classroom. He devoured books, Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, works on electricity, Hume, and Shakespeare. But reading wasn't enough. He needed to touch the world to understand it. By age 10, the basement of the Port Huron house was filled with jars of chemicals, scraps of metal, and coils of wire. He labeled every jar poison to keep his family away. He was searching for a spark, though he didn't yet know what it would ignite. Chapter 2, The Rolling Laboratory, 1859 to 1861. By 1859, at 12 years old, the walls of the Port Huron house could no longer contain him. He needed money for chemicals, for batteries, for copper wire. He needed to be where the world was moving. He convinced his parents to let him work on the Grand Trunk Railroad, which ran daily from Port Huron to Detroit and back. He became a news butcher, a boy who walked the aisles selling newspapers, candy, and cigars to passengers. The train was a sensory explosion. The smell of burning coal, the rhythmic clack-clack-clack of the wheels, the steam whistle screaming across the Michigan landscape, it was a symphony of the industrial age. Papers. Get your Detroit Free Press. Apples. Molasses candy. He was a relentless salesman. He realized quickly that bad news sold better than good news. If there was a rumor of war in the South, he hiked the price. He wasn't just a boy selling candy, he was a merchant. But the train offered something more valuable than wages, a space. The conductor allowed Ul to take over a small section of the baggage car, a windowless, rattling box filled with mailbags and luggage. Here, Ul recreated his sanctuary. He brought his chemicals, his test tubes, and his books aboard. While the train thundered toward Detroit, Ul would mix concoctions, testing volatile reactions as the wooden car swayed violently. It was a dangerous game. One afternoon in 1861, the train hit a rough patch of track. A jar of phosphorus fell from the shelf, shattering on the floor. On contact with the air, the phosphorus burst into angry, white-hot flames. Panic seized him. He tried to stomp it out, but the fire spread to the dry wood of the floorboards. Smoke filled the car. The conductor, a burly Scotsman named Alexander Stevenson, rushed in. He grabbed the boy by the collar and stomped the fire out with his heavy boots, then began tossing Ol's precious equipment out the sliding door: jars, books, the printing press Ol had recently bought to print his own newspaper, the Weekly Herald. "You fool!" Stevenson shouted, boxing the boy's ears with a heavy hand. The blow to his head was severe. Ol would later say that he felt something snap inside his ears. The world, already quiet, began to fade. The sharp crack of the train wheels dulled to a thrum. The voices of passengers became distant murmurs. He was kicked off the train at the next stop, his laboratory scattered in the dirt. But strangely, as the silence closed in around him, Thomas Edison didn't feel isolated. He felt focused. The distracting noise of the world was being dialed down, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Chapter 3, The Lightning Slinger, 1862. August 1862. The Civil War was raging in the South, consuming the nation's attention. But in Mount Clemens, Michigan, the summer air was thick and lazy. 15-year-old Edison was hanging around the train station. He was no longer the news butcher, he was drifting, looking for the next foothold. He stood on the platform, watching the station agent, J.U. Mackenzie, working inside the ticket office. A whistle blew. A heavy boxcar was being shunted onto a side track, rolling freely, gathering speed. Edison looked down the line. Playing in the gravel, directly in the path of the rolling iron beast, was a 3-year-old boy, Jimmy Mackenzie, the station agent's son. Time seemed to warp. The boxcar was silent and heavy, the boy was oblivious. Edison didn't think. He dropped his papers and sprinted. The gravel crunched under his boots. He threw himself at the child, grabbing Jimmy by the waist and diving off the track just as the steel wheel of the boxcar sheared the heel off Edison's boot. They tumbled into the sharp ballast rock, bruised and scraped, but alive. J.U. Mackenzie ran out, white-faced. When he saw his son safe, he wept. He turned to the scruffy teenager with the intense eyes. "I have no money to repay you, Ol," Mackenzie said, his voice trembling. "But I can teach you the trade. I can teach you the telegraph." Edison's eyes lit up. The telegraph. The lightning. It was the internet of the 19th century, the invisible web that connected the world. For 3 months, Edison lived at the station. He learned the language of dots and dashes. Because his hearing was fading, he learned to listen not just to the sounder, but to the vibration of the table. He didn't just hear the code, he felt it. By winter, he was a bona fide operator. He left home, joining the wandering tribe of lightning slingers. These were young men who traveled from city to city, working in smoky telegraph offices, transmitting news of battles, deaths, and cotton prices. Edison was a strange bird among them. He didn't drink or gamble. He spent his wages on books and equipment. He worked the night shift because it was quiet, and it allowed him to experiment. In Louisville, Memphis, Cincinnati, and New Orleans, he became a legend for 2 things: his speed on the key and his disastrous experiments. He was fired from a job in Louisville after spilling sulfuric acid through the floorboards, ruining the bank manager's desk in the room below. "You're a hazard, Edison," his boss screamed. "You're meant to be moving messages, not reinventing the world." "I can do both," Edison muttered, packing his bag. Chapter 4, The Death of Idealism, 1869. By 1868, Edison had landed in Boston. He was 21, wearing a frayed suit and looking like a vagabond, but his mind was sharper than ever. He had moved beyond just operating the machines, he was now improving them. He had an idea. A big one. Democracy, he observed, was inefficient. In Washington, roll call votes took hours. Yeah. Nay. Yeah. It was a waste of time. Edison designed a machine, the electrographic vote recorder. With a simple flip of a switch, a congressman could register a vote instantly, and the machine would tally the results. It was accurate, fast, and brilliant. He borrowed money, built a prototype, and secured his very first patent, a U.S. patent 90,646. In June 1869, he traveled to Washington, D.C., his heart pounding. He set up the machine before a congressional committee. He demonstrated the speed, the flawlessness of the count. He waited for the applause. Instead, the chairman of the committee, a sour-faced politician, leaned forward. "Young man," he said dismissively, "if there is any invention on earth that we don't want down here, that is it." Edison was stunned. "But, it saves time. It eliminates error. Filibustering and delaying votes is the only weapon the minority has," the politician explained. "A machine that speeds up the vote destroys our ability to maneuver. Take this thing away." Edison walked out of the Capitol building into the humid DC air, carrying his heavy, rejected machine. He felt a crushing weight, not of failure, but of naivety. He had invented something perfect, but it was useless because he hadn't understood the market. He stopped on the steps and made a vow that would define the rest of his life. "I will never again invent anything which does not have commercial utility. If it won't sell, I don't want to invent it." He abandoned the vote recorder. He was broke, disillusioned, and done with pure idealism. He headed to New York City. Chapter 5, The Crash and the Fix, 1869. New York in 1869 was a jungle of finance. Edison arrived with nothing but a few cents in his pocket. He slept in the basement of the Gold Indicator Company on Wall Street, subsisting on stale bread and tea. The Gold Indicator Company operated the stock tickers, machines that transmitted the fluctuating price of gold to brokers across the city. The entire economy of New York relied on these clicking glass-dome devices. One morning, chaos erupted. The central transmitting machine ground to a halt with a sickening crunch. The tickers in hundreds of brokerage offices went silent. Panic ensued. Brokers sent runners screaming to the office. The company president, Dr. Laws, was frantic, yelling at his engineers who were helplessly staring at the complex gears. Edison, unshaven and rumpled, stepped out of the shadows. He had been sleeping near the machine, he had watched it work for nights. "I can fix it," he said softly. Dr. Laws spun around. "Who the hell are you?" "I can fix it," Edison repeated. He stepped up to the machine, reached into the mechanism, and removed a broken spring that had jammed two gears. The machine whirred back to life. The tickers began to click. Dr. Laws looked at the young tramp with awe. "Come to my office." By the end of the day, Edison was no longer a vagrant. He was the manager of operations, earning a salary of $300 a month, more money than he had ever seen. He didn't save it. He invested it. He opened a workshop in Newark, New Jersey. He was done working for others. He was going to build things that people needed. Chapter 6, Mary and the Machine, 1871. The workshop in Newark was a chaotic hive. Edison hired machinists, clockmakers, and telegraphers. He was 24 years old, the boss, working 20 hours a day. He often slept on the workbenches, using a chemistry textbook as a pillow. But amidst the grease and gears, he noticed something else. Or rather, someone. Mary Stillwell was 16 years old, an employee in one of his shops. She was bright, cheerful, and possessed a beauty that stopped Edison in his tracks. He was socially awkward, partially deaf, and perpetually covered in soot. She was fresh and alive. He didn't know how to woo her. He couldn't whisper sweet nothings, he wouldn't hear her reply. So, he courted her the only way he knew how. One afternoon, standing near a window where the light caught the dust motes, he took her hand. He began to tap on her palm with his finger. ... She looked at him, confused, then giggled. He taught her Morse code. Soon, they were having silent conversations across the room, tapping on tables, on walls, on each other's hands. "Will you marry me?" he tapped onto her palm one evening. "Yes," she tapped back. They were married on Christmas Day, 1871. It should have been a fairy tale. But Thomas Edison was not designed for domesticity. Following the ceremony, there was a dinner. Edison ate quickly, his mind already drifting back to the problem of the automatic telegraph he was designing. As the guests mingled, he stood up. "I have to go to the shop for a moment," he told Mary. "Just a quick adjustment." He went to the Newark workshop. He took off his wedding coat, rolled up his sleeves, and began to work. The hours dissolved. The quick adjustment turned into an all-night session. Sometime past midnight, a friend found him hunched over a mesmerizing array of gears. "Tom! For God's sake, go home. You were married today." Edison looked up, blinking, the reality of his new life crashing into his obsession. "Is that so?" he mumbled. He put down his tools and walked home to his sleeping bride. It was the first sign of the tension that would plague his personal life. The man loved humanity, but he was married to his work. Chapter 7, The Quadruplex Gamble, 1874. By 1874, the stakes were higher than ever. The telegraph industry was dominated by Western Union, a massive monopoly. But a rival financier, the ruthless Jay Gould, was trying to break their hold. Both sides wanted one thing, a bandwidth. A telegraph wire could only carry one message at a time. Building new lines across the continent was expensive. If someone could make existing wires do more work, they would control the flow of information in America. Edison had already figured out how to send two messages at once, the duplex. But he had a vision of the quadruplex, two messages going one way, and two going the other way, simultaneously on the same single wire. It was physically impossible, according to the experts. It was like trying to pump water through a pipe in two directions at once without the streams colliding. Edison locked himself in the Newark lab. He was heavily in debt. He had a wife and a baby daughter, Marion, whom he nicknamed Dot, naturally calling his second child Dash. The creditors were circling. He needed a win. For months, he struggled with the physics. He had to manipulate the polarity of the current and the strength of the current independently. It was a delicate ballet of electricity. "It won't work, Tom," his assistant Charles Batchelor said, rubbing his tired eyes. "The signals are garbling." "It has to work," Edison snapped. "The logic is sound. The implementation is the problem." He designed a complex system of condensers and rheostats. He worked for 60 hours straight, fueled by tea and cigars. Finally, on a rainy Tuesday, the machine clicked. 4 distinct messages tapped out from 4 distinct sounders, fed by a single wire. He had done it. He had quadrupled the value of every telegraph line in the world. Western Union summoned him. The company president, William Orton, knew the value of what Edison held. If Jay Gould got this patent, Western Union was dead. Edison walked into the plush Manhattan office, his stomach in knots. He had discussed it with Mary. "If they offer me $4,000, he had told her, "I'll take it. That will pay off our debts." Orton sat behind a massive mahogany desk. "So, Mr. Edison. The quadruplex. It works?" "It works perfectly, sir. We want it. We want the rights." "Entirely." Edison nodded. "I am willing to sell." "How much?" Orton asked. Edison opened his mouth to say $4,000, but the words stuck in his throat. It was too much money to ask for. He felt like an imposter. He stayed silent, his face blank. Orton mistook the silence for hardball negotiation. He shifted in his chair. "Well, Mr. Edison, would you accept $10,000? Edison stopped breathing. $10,000? It was a fortune. In modern terms, it was $250,000. It was freedom. He managed to keep his face steady. "Yes," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "That would be acceptable." The next day, he took the check to the bank. The teller, playing a joke on the disheveled inventor, gave him the entire sum in small bills. Edison spent hours stuffing his pockets, his hat, and his coat with cash. He walked home to Newark, bulging with money, terrified he would be robbed, looking like a madman. When he dumped the mountain of greenbacks onto the kitchen table, Mary screamed. "We are free, Mary," Edison said, sinking into a chair, a rare smile breaking his stoic face. We are free to build. With that money, he would leave Newark. He would find a quiet spot in the countryside, a place called Menlo Park. He would build a new kind of factory, not for making buttons or steel, but for making inventions. The telegraphy years were over. The wizard was about to be born.